cat mewed in answer and stalked again stiffly round the leg of the table, mewing. Just how she stalks over my writing table. Purr, scratch my head, purr. Mr. Bloom watched curiously, kindly, the lithe black form. Clean to see, the gloss of her sleek hide, the white button under the butt of her tail, the green flashing eyes. He bent down to her, his hands on his knees. Milk for the pussins, he said. Meow, the cat cried. They call them stupid. They understand what we say better than we understand them. She understands all she wants to. Vindictive, too. Cruel, her nature. Curious, mice never squeal. Seem to like it. Wonder what I look.
The story began for many of us at an orientation in a lecture hall not 100 yards from here. Before he was even introduced, you knew he was special. Not only did the jacket he wore on such occasions immediately Pavlov the classic image of a professor, but he wasted no time congratulating us in a top 10 list for our wisdom in choosing UCSD, and specifically Muir College, over the other fine universities of the world, especially over what he called some other UC in the Bay Area that he couldn't quite recall the name. Wasting no opportunity to bring mathematics into the lesson, and not 15 minutes after he had met any one of us, he divided the days of the week into hours, the hours to minutes, and made it obviously clear, after fulfilling a college student's modest eating, sleeping, and studying requirements, how much time there was to get involved in the campus. In such a way, he set the tone for our learning community, while we were introduced to the man who created and tended the warm environment we would call home until graduation.
I started writing at a young age. I was editor of my high school paper. I was into journalism. And Pat was a Joycean scholar. He loved literature. So here was somebody who blended the sciences and the arts, who blended writing and mathematics. And it thrilled me, and I'd read Joyce, and I'd go talk to him about Joyce. And he'd wear these tweed coats with the patches on the arms and had this almost like liberal arts, Ivy League sort of feel to him. It made me feel like I was in a different time and place.
In the classroom, he was spectacular. His 8 a.m. math lectures, where he would draw his signature perfect circles, were powerful enough to bring surfers back to UCSD, even if they still were in a dripping wetsuit. His honest love for teaching is unquestionable. When he taught James Joyce, he lit up with a contagious enthusiasm that inspired many students in the subject and gave credence to his advice to study what you love.
I guess I've known Pat Ledin the better part of 30 years. I've always believed he was an interesting combination of an intense intellect and a kind of patrician caprice. He was a superb calculus teacher of mathematics, and also taught the James Joyce class, and I could never quite reconcile that in my mind, and I thought that meant strange. What I came to believe was that kind of duality between the arts and the science, his approach to the universe really, was sort of what his personality was like. He was curious about all sorts of things, and not in a petty sort of way, but curious to find out how things worked. And I think that's the language and love and art of math. But it probably was the language, art, and love of Joyce. And I think he was attracted to Joyce, and probably would not have been attracted to Shakespeare in the same way, because Joyce is a dilemma. Joyce is a conundrum. Joyce is about expression, but it's also about device. And I think in that sense, his involvement with mathematics as well as with James Joyce and that literature was consistent.
I would often just find him and hang out and just talk, about nothing other than what I was reading, what I was thinking, nothing to do with calculus. And his hard disk was huge. He knew so many things about so many subjects.
To smell the gentle smoke of tea, fume of the pan, sizzling butter, be near her ample bed-worn flesh. Yes, yes. Quick, warm sunlight came running from Berkeley Road, swiftly, in slim sandals along the brightening footpath. She runs to meet me, a girl with gold hair on the wind.
I just felt like he was really a poet, at heart. Just somebody with limitless curiosity. And it inspired me. It inspired me to blend the arts and the sciences. And I ended up becoming a science writer, I think, to a large degree because of Pat's example of blending those things.
Inish Turk, Inish Shark, Inish Boffin, at their jogger fry. Mine, Slive Bloom. He halted before Dlugoth's window, staring at the hanks of sausages, polonies, black and white, 15 multiplied. The figures whitened in his mind, unsolved. Displeased, he let them fade.
I hadn't used the term before, but in many ways, I often thought of Pat as a Mr. Chips. He was so thoughtful, so concerned about people, so level-headed in terms of being able to understand both sides of an issue and bring people together. I had high regard for Pat. Everything that I was involved in as president, I wanted to vet out with Pat. The various admissions issues, the issues with regard to the SAT exams and the like, those were all issues that I vetted out very carefully with Pat. So we maintained very close relationships. And what's so interesting to me, though, about Pat was that yesterday I had lunch with Sal Price, and out of the clear blue sky, he commented on Pat Ledin and how marvelous Pat was. I hadn't even realized that Pat had known Sal Price. But the fact is that he was a wonderful communicator with the community in a very low-key way, but a very thoughtful way, and one where people really respected his attitudes and his judgments about matters. He built wonderful relationships with the community. The Stewart Collection is part of it, but it went far, far beyond the Stewart Collection. The people who interacted with him and had a different view of the university because of the way he was able to communicate ideas.
How many teachers stick with you in life? I mean, how many professors remain part of your life in any sense? I mean, there have been a handful in my life of teachers who have made that kind of impact on me, who've had that kind of impact. And I was delighted to see him grow into this new role as a TV personality, too. It was really fun to watch him do that.
Try again. We here at UCSD can now be in your homes with the latest information about medical advances, about scientific discoveries, technological developments, can't smile and think, sorry. We here at UCSD will now be able to be in your homes with the latest information about medical advances and scientific discoveries and technological developments, public policy programs about San Diego and the nation, as well as interesting and informative films and plays and lectures. We want to reach you. Please join us.
He did it very well. It tapped into exactly what I liked about him, his just incredible range of knowledge and curiosity. And as with any good host of a TV program or a radio program, he let the person he was interviewing shine.
One of the sad things about our rather pragmatic culture is that somehow art is play, and only play. It's oftentimes fairly hard work, and for kids to learn that it's not just playing. There's a certain discipline to it. There's a certain outcome of ensemble effort. I mean, all of these things are wonderful.
It's collective problem solving.
Sure.
It's a bunch of things that are just beyond, that are outside the specific art that you're learning. But kids, I think, it's training. It's kind of they get it in the schools when you don't do workshops in math.
No.
You do workshops in theater. You do a workshop in dance. You don't do one day every month with math or with reading. No, you do it with art. And they love, I think one of the things that they really love, that the students in these classrooms love, is that they see here are grown-ups who are actually focusing on art for their life. I never knew we could do that.
He didn't step in and try to show off ever about, oh, I know so much, He would, with curiosity, he'd say, well that's fascinating. Tell me more, and close his eyes and, and he'd earnestly listen. And he had a gift. I mean, he could have been in this life a TV host of an intellectual program. I mean, that could have been all he did, and he would have been great at that.
Those are the heady days of the late 60s and early 70s,
Right.
and I was part of the first group of women that were undergraduates at Yale College.
And then you went to Yale Medical School.
And then I stayed.
But not many women went to medical school in those days.
It was relatively uncommon in those days
What
for women
provoked
to.
that on your part?
Well, I came from a family where my parents were both physicians, so it became naturally, I knew what the career pathway was in medicine, and my parents were very fulfilled in their careers, and I saw that and I modeled my behavior on their behavior.
Even though you weren't what we would think of as a typical pre-med student here?
Not at all. They also were very clear when I was growing up that it was important to become a whole person and not just focus on your career, and so they introduced me to cultural events growing up in New York, and I was very aware of the importance of reading and literature, and so I was a French literature major as an undergraduate at Yale.
Oh, so my spies were almost right.
Almost right, almost right.
In the years then, since you started your training of medicine, the world of medicine has changed enormously.
Indeed.
I mean, in a variety of ways, not just in terms of, say, managed care and so on, but also the technology of medical care, and just the host of ways in which it's almost a different profession. Is that a fair remark?
I think
not
that,
a different profession, but
well, I think it's fair to say that the increased knowledge that we have acquired in the last 25 years, both technologic knowledge and basic science knowledge, has made medicine both more complicated and more efficient at what they do, and has changed the face of human disease in America.
If you have to be sick, it's better to be sick now than 25 years ago.
Depends what you have.
All right.
Depends what you have and where you live, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, that's still true.
He had that sort of Terry Gross sort of appeal of just a broad base of knowledge and a sparkle.
It's probably dangerous to ask an artist about her favorite works or her important works. It's like asking a mother about her children, right? They're all
Which one do
terrific,
you like
right? They're
more?
all terrific, right? But you did a couple that it seems to me sort of framed that early time, the boots and the carving.
Right.
Carving, I mean, that raised elements of where you sort of took pictures of yourself on a diet.
Yeah, every day.
Every day.
Yes, and from the same poses. And
How much weight did you lose?
I lost, I think, 13 pounds. I can't remember exactly. Over 36 days.
So that's pretty fast.
Yeah, and the intention was that it's called carving, a traditional sculpture, because when the Greeks would carve their marble, they would carve all around the figure. And in my case, when you know, in all of our cases, when we lose weight, we lose a little here, we lose a little there.
Right.
And so what happens is that each day I photographed myself in the same spot. It was easy just with a timer like this. And front, back, and two profiles, and then the piece is vertically each day, and horizontally you can follow like a sort of, you know, like a slow motion film. You can follow. See, oh yeah, she lost a little there. And I stopped when the perfect form that was in the marble had been achieved.
So you discovered the form within the marble,
Yes,
right?
exactly. I may have started off not as the most pristine
Well, but it's a
marble.
block of marble, right?
Possibilities.
It was always a surprise what he could talk about. And I know when he was doing the UCSD conversations, the people he interviewed were so wide-ranging in their disciplines. And yet Pat was the one person who could read their work, be it scientific or in the humanities or the social sciences, and cut to the very essence of what they were doing and ask the questions that made sense and have a conversation that was truly of a generalist nature that would help the audience to understand what this was all about. But it always fascinated me that he could do that he could take any topic and so quickly understand it. It was his great intellect, and yet his humanity, his authenticity was just always there. He could understand all of the concepts, but he brought to it all a personhood, an authenticity that just made you realize you were talking with somebody who wanted to know and was going to pay attention. It was just, you will hear from everybody how kind he is and what a kind person he was. And 16 years of working with him and watching and being involved in all sorts of situations, he was really unflappable. He did have a strong sense of fairness, a strong sense of honesty, and he so admired the students here for their intellectual capacity, but he always saw them also in their families and in their real life situations. And he had some wonderful students who were just came to think of him as a parent. And we've gotten lots of letters since his death from parents and from students who say that his advice, his following up with them, was what made a difference in their careers at UCSD.
I saw something in one of the memorials, a description of Pat Ledin as a gentleman, 2 words, and a gentleman. And I think the distinction between those two are the embodiment of Pat Ledin. My daughter was a Muir college student in the early 90s, and she was full of fire and beans, and she was writing articles for the school paper, some outrageous, but always on the edge, got a little tension on it. And she wanted to go talk to her provost and wondered why Muir College didn't do X or didn't do Y tomorrow. And I heard many months later that she actually met with him 6, 7 times. I think they went out for coffee. And this is a very busy man, and he wasn't just being nice to my daughter. I think he treated all students this way. And he talked about what a revolution could look like and how she could participate in a revolution, not just heaving verbal grenades, but preparing herself to be a soldier in the best sense in a revolution for change and justice that she wanted to see in society. And I think he cultivated her mind. He cultivated her energy in a way that a parent couldn't. I couldn't have had that conversation. Well, I had that conversation with my daughter, but I don't think she was listening. But I think someone of the gentleness, the gentleman, Pat Ledin, and the intellectual force of Pat Ledin, without being brutal, helped shape the life of my daughter, and I will be eternally grateful to him for that. She still speaks about him.
You talk with a faculty person who might be outraged, and Pat would listen to what the outrage was and offer whatever good offices of his position could offer, whether it would be to talk with somebody else or to bring together a meeting. And then after that he'd say, "So tell me, how are things going with you? What's up with you?" And there'd be another 20 minutes while Pat listened to what was going on with him. So I think that accounts for that sense of gentleness, that he was so careful about his interactions with people. He was a compassionate person who was always available. We've had many different situations occur amongst the staff, and one staff person had a real serious problem with their newborn infant. And Pat's words to her were, "It shouldn't be this way. It just shouldn't be this way." And that was something that she remembered for years and years and years, just that he understood sort of the inside. There are lots of platitudes you can say to people at a time of that, but to just really get inside and echo what it is that you feel at that time, that it shouldn't be this way.
I think if Pat Ledin means anything to his students and people who knew him well, it was that his deep integrity. His integrity for the poetry of mathematics, the poetry of James Joyce, and I think for the behavior of this precious environment called a university.
Quarter 2, there again, the overtone following through the air. A third, poor dignity. Thank you for having this nice program. It's the end of chapter 4.
Alas, death is part of life. But it is from the destruction of death that only the new can be born. The first sentence of James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake is a continuation of the last. This is a parable of life, for without a beginning there can be no end, and without an end there can be no beginning. Death, birth, and life are all inseparable. My father spent his career as a teacher and educator, but all teachers are by necessity students as well. And he was a student of so many things: mathematics, literature, Irish history, and modern art, to say a few. But I should add that he continued to learn until the very end.
You know, it's one thing when you're well and healthy to maintain that dignity, but even at his most vulnerable stage, even when he was most ill, he still had that great dignity and that great grace. Just an amazing person.
Will the candidates for the degrees Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Sciences from John Muir College please rise? I present the 1997 candidates for the degrees Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Sciences from John Muir College.
The word in Yiddish is a mensch. He was a good person, you know, who did the right thing regardless of what other people did. So that was it.